It all kicks off with this girl who, literally, has the facial expression of a brick wall calling out to Jinyoung in the school hallway. He plays it cool, awkwardly confirming to himself that his ironclad life philosophy is to treat all women like inanimate rocks. Rewind to middle school, the poor guy got turned down roughly 20 times by his classmates. Being a constant punching bag for playground mockery, the excuses for the rejections were as creative as they were brutal. Naturally, the kid was left feeling totally crushed, unable to grasp why he was so unwanted by his peers. Having lost every ounce of confidence, he decided to cook up an imaginary friend to serve as his wingman for relationship advice. This counselor popped up right on his bed, and he christened him with the name Jason. Little Jason's golden nugget of wisdom: just imagine every girl is a literal rock. So our main guy spent years repeating this mantra in his head, mentally training himself to believe the delusion. By the time he hit high school, the madness actually worked. Students genuinely started looking like giant boulders to him. Back to the present, Jinyoung is trekking through the hallway when someone suddenly shouts his name. The rock-faced classmate asks if he's free after school because she's dying to study with him. He immediately tells himself not to fall for it, convinced that a simple invite doesn't mean she has actual feelings. Being straightforward to dodge any drama, he brushes her off, claiming he's way too busy at the moment. He walks off with total ease, concluding that dealing with women has become a piece of cake with this tactical approach. Obviously, the strategy is flawless, since you can chat with a rock without any messy emotions getting in the way. He glances over in the hallway and asks his imaginary partner if he isn't totally right about this whole thing. Jason, who is now a super buff dude with a mustache, fully agrees with that logical train of thought. Despite the plan's success, Jinyoung secretly fears that things will stay this way forever and hell never land a real date. His muscle-bound buddy reminds him that they'd already agreed to give up on the whole romance thing ages ago. Walking out of school, the guy decides he'd rather live in comfort than deal with snarky comments about how he looks. While strolling down the street talking about self-acceptance, they spot a phone left on the sidewalk. Jinyoung immediately raises his voice to get the attention of the person walking just ahead of them. He holds the phone out toward the owner, giving a quick heads-up about the lost object on the ground. The young woman notes that he seems to have let the device slip, then turns around to thank him for the assist. As he looks back, the student's real, drop-dead gorgeous appearance is finally revealed. Our main guy is left completely paralyzed with shock as he locks eyes with her. With absolutely zero clue what he's looking at, he tries to process the glitch in his perfect delusion. The girl looks confused by his stare, while the poor guy panics, desperate to figure out the reason for this anomaly. This is a massive problem, since it's been ages since he's seen the face of a normal woman. Desperation takes over the teenager's mind as he fights to stay calm in this totally unexpected situation. Noticing the awkward, long silence, the girl eventually asks why he isn't saying a word. Breaking out in a cold sweat, he tries to rationalize that his over-the-top reaction is just because he's out of practice. But his mouth is faster than his brain, and he ends up blurting out loud that she's really beautiful. He freezes in his tracks the second the weight of his embarrassing comment hits him. The girl is visibly caught off guard by the sudden compliment from a total stranger on the street. She thanks him awkwardly while he shoves the phone into her hand and bolts, running for his life. Sprinting down the street, he just lets out a frantic apology without even looking back. She stands there in the middle of the sidewalk, watching his bizarre exit and thinking the whole interaction was super weird. Running like a maniac through the park, our guy calls himself a total idiot for the legendary display of awkwardness he just pulled off. He can't accept that he had the nerve to compliment the beauty of someone he met on the street in a split second. It turns into a nightmare in his head, terrified that his shame will turn into serious gossip back at school. By nighttime, the city air cools down while the student reflects on the tragic day in his apartment. Sitting in his room, Jason comments that he thought his buddy's move was actually pretty cute and even a bit suave. Totally sprawled on the floor in embarrassment, Jinyoung cries his heart out while his buff friend tries to lift his spirits. The guy is still super intrigued, trying to figure out why that girl is the only one immune to his visual superpower. His muscular advisor admits he's stumped, shifting the focus to what their next move should be. Jinyoung concludes that leaving things as they are might start some seriously compromising rumors about him. A horrific memory of a girl acting disgusted by him surfaces, reviving the trauma of being totally humiliated. Even after all that rigorous mental training, he deeply regrets that a slip-up like this can still happen. Huddled in the corner of his room hugging his knees, the guy feels like his peace of mind is ruined forever. At that, the imaginary big guy lands a solid punch on his friend's head to snap him back to reality. Jinyoung rubs the bump on his forehead, while Jason tells him to stop spiraling and focus on a survival plan. The guy thinks the simplest solution to this whole mystery is just to avoid bumping into her in the halls. Realizing she seems to be in a different class, he concludes that he just needs to be super careful where he walks at school. The next day, walking near school, our guy feels super confident that his evasive tactics are going to work. The mood in the massive school courtyard seems calm, signaling the start of a normal, surprise-free day. But destiny strikes fast, and the beautiful girl appears right in front of him, asking excitedly if he recognizes her. The poor guy is so startled he almost falls backward, with the irony of the universe slapped right in his face. Desperate for backup, he cries out for his friend, who just advises him to stay calm and act naturally. Ignoring the students around them, he decides to treat the beautiful girl with the same coldness he gives the rock-faced classmates. But he realizes too late that she's actually commenting on the embarrassing compliment from the day before. The gossip explodes instantly among the rock girls, who are totally shocked by his sudden boldness. Keeping his tough guy pose, Jinyoung drops a short comment trying to end the subject right there. Seizing the comedic opportunity, the girl gives a teasing smile and asks if she also looks beautiful today. Without any defense, he's paralyzed with embarrassment while listening to the group's fun teasing. Without thinking twice, he activates his ultimate survival mode, turns his back and runs away. His buff friend supports the tactical retreat, agreeing that standing there would be asking to get shredded. Walking fast up the stairs, he tries not to let it shake him, convinced her laugh was pure mockery. In a moment of protective clarity, he warns himself not to start building any false romantic hopes. Far away, the girl is left clueless about the sudden escape, while Jinyoung swears in his thoughts that he'll never see her again. But a desperate teenager's promises usually don't last long against the relentless whims of fate. In the crowded school courtyard, the girl's vibrant appearance draws insane attention amidst all the rock-like silhouettes. As soon as she notices him and waves from afar, Jinyoung realizes the danger and sees there's no way to just ignore her. With that, he jumps behind a pillar, accepting that his only choice is to hide like a fugitive every single day. Hiding behind the pillar, the guy mutters in pure nervousness while trying to go unnoticed. As soon as she walks right by while chatting with a friend, he takes the chance to slip away. However, she ends up looking back, feeling like something strange was happening in the hallway. By late afternoon, the student breathes a sigh of relief, believing he managed to survive the day in total safety. Walking down the streets, Jinyoung concludes this routine is exhausting and decides he needs to hatch a new plan. Sitting on a park bench, he laments this whole situation, unable to grasp how things reached this point. Suddenly, the girl pops up right behind him with a greeting that sounds almost like an ambush. The poor guy jumps in shock, screaming in terror while she asks ironically if she ended up scaring him. With that, our guy questions why they keep bumping into each other and thinks he needs to avoid her at all costs. Without losing her rhythm, the student stares him down and asks directly if he's going to try running away again. She claims that attitude is unbelievable since she tries to be friendly and he spends the whole time ignoring her. Plus, the girl points out that he avoids eye contact and always flees, asking if she did something wrong. Grabbing his backpack straps, Jinyoung tries to defend himself, saying she's the one acting really strange. He spirals into mental despair over this new misunderstanding and tries to think of a good excuse fast. Pressed by her gaze, the guy stutters endlessly, trying to explain the reason for his bizarre behavior. Desperate for a quick excuse, he looks around, seeing the other students with rock faces and tries to form a sentence. Without thinking straight, Jinyoung ends up confessing that every other girl looks like a rock to him except for her. The student stays silent for a moment, processing the unusual declaration she just heard. The teenager turns his face away immediately, realizing the massive blunder that just tumbled out of his own mouth. In his mind, he calls for Jason, while his buff friend reacts with total disappointment at his critical communication failure. The young woman blinks in surprise, absorbing the weight of those somewhat curious words. With that, the guy's hands start to shake uncontrollably from all the nervousness. He stays paralyzed, sweating bullets and shaking from head to toe, expecting the worst rejection possible. However, a small smile starts to form discreetly on the girl's face. She then breaks into a radiant smile, thinking the whole situation is incredibly adorable. Moving a bit closer, the student asks for his name and confirms it as soon as he answers with a stutter. She leans toward him, asking in a soft tone if she can say one little thing. Gently touching his chin, the young woman notes that the sentence he just let slip was a pretty smooth flirt. Satisfied with the interaction, she walks away calmly, leaving the main guy totally in shock on the sidewalk. Trapped in his thoughts, he remembers the exact moment he got the golden advice from his friend in childhood. Watching the young woman walk away, the guy realizes that the #1 rule of treating women like rocks failed miserably. His heart starts pounding, directly attacking his second rule, which was to never build expectations. Grabbing his own shirt, the student admits that his emotional wall has been completely destroyed. In the blink of an eye, his mind creates a whole lifetime with the girl, imagining marriage, kids, and even old age together. His imaginary partner lands a solid slap on Jinyoung's face, trying to snap his buddy out of that disastrous delusion. Already sitting on his room's floor, the guy tries to justify himself, claiming it's normal to freak out after seeing the first real face in 5 years. Accepting that the escape tactic isn't working anymore, he asks his counselor what the next step should be. Pointing his finger firmly, Jason decrees that in critical situations like this, the most important thing is having a clear goal. The big guy explains that seeing girls as rocks made him stop feeling anything, maintaining a cold posture. This perfect shield was the big trump card that ensured Jinyoung never got hurt because of a girl again. But with the sudden appearance of a normal woman, the terrible side effect of all that training finally appeared. The friend emphasizes that the lack of immunity to a real female face was the perfect trigger to expose the guy's silliest side. Jinyoung agrees with the analysis, fearing that the lack of control might lead to the same humiliating traumas of the past. The counselor calms the situation, guaranteeing that there is a solution and that the focus now should be keeping his cool around her. The next day, the school routine restarts with the students enjoying the morning in the massive school courtyard. Straining his eyes in the middle of the hallway, the guy stares at a fixed point in the distance with a super tense expression. On the other side of the courtyard, the beautiful student quickly notices the piercing gaze fixed directly on her. The young woman's friend excitedly warns her that Jinyoung is undressing her with his eyes, but soon finds it odd and thinks he looks pretty furious. Hiding behind a column, he reviews with his imaginary partner that this is the grand desensitization plan. The brilliant idea consists of staring at the girl until his brain gets used to it, but Jason suggests he try to smile a little. Following the tip, the teenager tries to look friendlier but ends up forcing a super bizarre smile. The young woman is visibly unsettled upon noticing that weird expression coming from the back of the hallway. Ignoring the weirdness, the friend flips out with joy, warning her that he just smiled at her, leaving the student speechless. In her thoughts, the girl wonders why he's being so obvious, thinking she wouldn't notice the stare. Dropping the strange smile, Jinyoung deduces that the distance is too great for anyone to notice the details of his face. Worried about generating unwanted rumors if he continues acting like a lunatic, he decides to retreat. The student just watches in silence as the guy turns his back and walks away mysteriously once again. With that, the meddlesome friend brings up the topic, wanting to know if the young woman named Sujung knows the reputation of that student. She guarantees that Jinyoung is very popular at school and that several students have already tried some romantic approach with him. However, the big mystery surrounding the guy is that he always seems to have zero interest in absolutely anyone. The classmate emphasizes that this cool and independent guy stance is exactly what ironically attracts female attention. Curious, she asks directly if Sujung is developing some kind of interest in him just because she was observed. Trying to play it off, the girl looks away quickly and denies the insinuation, saying it has nothing to do with that. However, the memory of the unusual confession that occurred at late afternoon doesn't leave the student's head. Touching her own lips with a mischievous smile, Sujung admits that there is a small detail occupying her thoughts. Elsewhere, the main guy stares at the classroom sign while calling his imaginary counselor. Once inside the room, he reflects better on the situation and concludes that the desensitization plan isn't that good after all. Sitting at the desk, Jinyoung explains that the idea of getting used to the girl's face requires him to follow her everywhere. The guy realizes that following the young woman from afar and staring fixedly is an attitude worthy of a stalker. The buff big guy ponders the argument and questions if his buddy is actually serious. Instead of looking like a weirdo, the student suggests that trying to find the girl's social media would be much better. Jason loves the strategy change, encouraging his buddy to go to the young woman immediately to ask for her contact. The teenager panics at the idea of asking in person, thinking this will create a very awkward vibe. Trying to build up courage in the middle of the empty hallway, he stutters while practicing how to ask for her profile naturally. However, destiny acts faster, and Sujung appears walking in the hallway exactly at the moment of his practice. The young woman accepts the unusual request right away. Excited, the guy takes her phone, warning her that he's going to type his profile, while Sujung comments that he seems to be handling this like a pro. Taking the device back, the student says she's going to take a look. She stays silent for an instant before letting out a murmur of confusion. The recently created profile on the screen has absolutely no photos or followers. Soon, Sujung questions if he just created that account, leaving Jinyoung sweating bullets upon confirming the suspicion. Trying to justify himself, the teenager explains he doesn't usually use social media and asks if there's a problem with that. The girl simply bursts into laughter, leaving the poor guy unable to understand the reason for so much amusement. She quickly cracks the code and concludes that the guy went after her the exact second he created the profile. The main guy stands planted in the hallway, feeling the weight of that impeccable deduction. In shock, he realizes the massive blunder he committed and how he left his intentions written all over his face. While the young woman finds the situation hilarious, he laments having focused so much on the goal to the point of forgetting the basics. Desperate, Jinyoung calls for Jason in his thoughts, feeling that his disguise has gone out the window. Stuttering a lot, the student tries to invent a lame excuse that she was just the first person he happened to meet. But the terrible excuse only makes the student laugh even more at his face. Trying to maintain what little dignity remained, the guy asks her to stop with the laughter. In a very teasing tone, the young woman holds the phone and asks if he isn't also curious to know her number. The shock hits Jinyoung full force in the face of that very direct advance. Sweating cold, he tries to formulate some response, but the words simply don't leave his mouth. Giving a friendly little punch on his arm, Sujung warns him it's just a joke and that she loves the colleague's exaggerated reactions. She gives the phone back, stating that she already followed him back on the social network. Walking away down the hallway, the student asks him to like her photos a lot, while the guy agrees awkwardly. The teenager stands alone in the middle of the path trying to process the hurricane that just passed by. Immediately, his mind projects a complete movie of a romantic future beside the girl. Trying to keep his feet on the ground, our guy tells himself to stop with those dangerous delusions. The day ends and the night falls quietly over the massive school building. Already in the comfort of her room, the beautiful girl relaxes lying on her own bed. Looking at her phone screen, she giggles, thinking what she's seeing is very funny. The reason for the joke is the extremely stiff selfie Jinyoung used as a profile picture. At the same time, the teenager twists in embarrassment on his bedroom bed, regretting his actions. A notification shines on the screen showing that Sujung's photo just received a like. Silence takes over the early morning in the student's residential neighborhood. The next day at school, a classmate is shocked to discover that Jinyoung asked for her friend's social network. Finding it funny, Sujung confirms the story and adds the detail about the newly created account. Intrigued by the situation, the meddlesome classmate stands up, claiming she has a great curiosity. She recalls the guy's reputation for not caring about anyone, concluding that he only acts specially with Sujung. The young woman is pensive at the comment, while the classmate notices Jinyoung walking very close by. The friend proposes doing a quick test to confirm if the rumor is really true. Walking calmly through the hallway, our guy is surprised by a loud shout right behind him. Striking an extremely dramatic pose on the ground, the classmate warns out loud that she just fell. With a brilliant, pity-seeking look, she repeats that she got hurt pretty badly in the fall. In her head, the perfect plan involves the guy running to help her up like a gentleman. However, the main guy's spell remains active, and he sees the girl thrown on the ground as a mere stone statue. Without a shred of empathy, the teenager lifts the classmate by the jacket collar while letting out a grunt of disgust. Without looking back, he follows his path normally, leaving the girl paralyzed in the hallway. The classmate tries to recover her posture, while Sujung starts laughing at that pathetic scene. Laughing a lot, the beautiful student jokes that the guy pulled her as if she were a turnip in a garden. Humiliated, the classmate curses the main guy in her thoughts. The school day advances at the big school with students enjoying the break outdoors. Walking near the track, the teenager questions his counselor if he should have already gotten used to the young woman's face. He confesses that he can't stop looking at the student whenever he has a chance. Analyzing the photos on his phone, the guy realizes her beauty seems like a novelty every time he meets her. The imaginary mustached friend suggests they need to discover the true reason for this immunity. The main guy forces his mind to understand why only that student escapes his visual delusion. Stopping in the middle of the path, he gives a fake cough while trying to formulate a plausible theory. Further ahead, Sujung watches another classmate from afar and murmurs that the situation seems kind of complicated. Turning her face suddenly, the beautiful girl notices the main guy standing nearby. She calls Jinyoung's name and approaches calmly, taking the teenager totally by surprise. The poor guy grumbles quietly, irritated by always getting startled by her sudden approach. Upon being questioned about what he's doing standing there, he explains he needs to catch the bus home but is out of money. Curious, the student asks where he lives and is surprised to hear the name of the condo. The young woman points out that the place is very close and you can walk, but Jinyoung stutters, saying it isn't that simple. She maintains a fixed gaze on her classmate, waiting patiently for a better explanation. In an ironic tone, the girl suggests that the difficulty of walking is due to chronic anemia. Taking some money out of her purse, she offers to pay for the bus fare, making the teenager panic and refuse right away. Giving some little pats on his shoulder, the young woman tells him to just walk home with her. Seeing the guy's hesitation, the student takes the lead and warns him that he can't abandon her there. The poor guy is completely stunned by the sudden invitation to go home together. The late afternoon paints the neighborhood sky with warm colors while the two begin their walk. Side by side on the sidewalk, the beautiful girl keeps the conversation going throughout the journey. Sweating from nervousness, Jinyoung can't process absolutely any word she's saying. Noticing his distraction, she asks if he's listening, while the guy laments internally about that situation. The walk continues through the busy streets, leaving the main guy with absurd discomfort. Immediately, an old memory surfaces about a classmate from the past who always took the same way back. In the memory, some kids walk by pointing and asking the reason for him walking side by side with the girl. In the painful memory of the past, other kids appear asking if the two are dating, making the girl scream in despair that they have nothing to do with each other. With much anger, she asks out loud who in their right mind would date someone like him. After that terrible day, the girl never walked home with the guy again, and everything ended without him even being able to confess. Back to the present, the main guy concludes that whole situation makes him very uncomfortable, just wanting the walk to end fast. Walking further ahead, the student comments that she usually takes the bus, so this shouldn't happen again next time. Mentally exhausted, he just lets out a heavy sigh while they continue up the hill. Suddenly, the beautiful girl falls sitting on the ground panting, making the teenager scream her name in shock. Frightened by the fall, the guy asks what's wrong and if she ended up tripping on something along the way. Breathing with much difficulty, the young woman curses the steep street and recalls she suffers from chronic anemia. Extending her trembling hand toward him, she asks for a little help to be able to walk, being promptly assisted. With that, he pulls her very carefully, warning her to go slowly while the classmate thanks him for the support. Leaning on the guy, the young woman complains of dizziness, while the teenager's mind short-circuits upon realizing they're holding hands. The student continues breathing very heavily, showing she really has no energy at all. Seeing the scene, the main guy questions out loud what exactly she was trying to do a moment ago. Soon the teenager's mind remembers the exact moment he lifted the meddlesome classmate by her jacket collar without the slightest pity. The beautiful girl bursts into laughter, remembering the ridiculous scene she witnessed in the school hallway. Pointing her finger, she comments laughing that he pulled the girl like a radish, while the poor guy asks who the heck that person is. Finally reaching the destination, the teenager warns he's home and suggests they say goodbye right there. The two wave at each other, with the main guy feeling an immense relief for that torture having reached its end. Turning his back and following his path, he grumbles quietly that was an incredibly uncomfortable moment. Thanking God, Jinyoung prays that the student has money for the bus the next day and this doesn't repeat. Walking through the streets illuminated by the sunset, he hopes she treats that anemia soon so his own imagination stops creating delusions. The late afternoon remains quite calm in the student's residential neighborhood. But suddenly, the young woman lets out a small murmur upon realizing a detail. Turning her face quickly, the student warns that she almost forgot to say one very important thing. She then shouts excitedly the main guy's name in the middle of the street, making the guy jump in fright. Looking back, Jinyoung awaits the next bomb with great nervousness. The girl warns that it will take a while until she receives her allowance, so she's counting on his help tomorrow too. The impact of the news leaves the teenager completely out of breath and static in place. In his thoughts, he laments wanting only to run away from her, while Jason appears sitting on the floor stating he is curious about one thing. The young woman finds the classmate's terrified reaction strange, asking what kind of bizarre expression that is on his face. Unable to take the strain, the guy lets out a groan of weakness and simply collapses on the floor. Soon after, the student sits on the sidewalk completely panting after having made so much physical effort. Worried, she asks if he's okay and curses her own running, telling the teenager to stay sitting for now. Later in the room, Jason resumes yesterday's topic, wanting to know the reason why only that girl doesn't look like a rock. Sitting on the floor, the main guy reflects on the mysterious student who appeared out of nowhere, totally immune to his visual delusion. With his muscular friend relaxing beside him, the guy states he has already formulated a very strong theory about the case. Confident, he believes faithfully that he finally managed to unravel this great mystery. However, at the time of revealing the answer, the teenager hesitates and lets out only a very confused murmur. The big counselor questions if that is really the only reason, but Jinyong admits he can't think of anything else. Grabbing his backpack hurriedly, the student warns they'll talk better on the way, as they need to go to school. With everything ready, he opens the room door prepared to face another school day. The main guy walks slowly through the house hallway, paying attention to his surroundings. In the living room, his father appears standing in silence, demonstrating great physical exhaustion. Breaking the heavy mood, Jinyong does a small bow and wishes a good day somewhat awkwardly. Trying to be polite, the guy asks if his father has eaten yet, warning he's going to skip breakfast from pure lack of hunger. The man warns that his mother prepared stew, making his son promise he'll eat when he returns later. While the teenager walks to the exit, his father insists he eat properly before going to class. Without much excitement, the student warns he's leaving and opens the front door of the house. A feeling of pure discouragement takes over the main guy early in the morning. Walking down the street toward school, he talks internally, commenting on the imaginary friends theory. With Jason sitting on his shoulder, Jinyong deduces he's destined to be dragged around by the girl from now on, and there's no way to avoid it. Speeding up his pace, he prays the theory is wrong, while his partner asks him not to worry so much about it. Suddenly, an aggressive voice echoes along the path, calling the main guy's full name. Standing right in front of him, the classmate in the yellow jacket waits with arms crossed with a very intimidating posture. Full of attitude, the girl warns bluntly that she's about to beat him up. Without expressing the slightest concern for that, the teenager just asks the reason for that gratuitous threat. The girl reveals she spent the whole night practicing low kicks just to make him suffer, while he asks who the heck she is. Indignant at the classmate's amnesia, she recalls the extreme embarrassment she went through in the hallway and shouts that she was totally humiliated. In the offended girl's mind, the scene of him lifting her by the collar like a vegetable is considered an unforgivable crime. Raising 3 fingers, the classmate warns Shell be generous and give only 3 low kicks, telling him to get ready. The guy prepares for the commotion, trying to understand why he needs to go through this test right now. Before the girl can attack, the teenager acts faster and lands a direct kick on her leg, tearing out a scream of pain. Whimpering a lot, the girl walks away limping and grumbling while the main guy provokes, asking if she's already going to run away. However, she recovers quickly and enters an attack position, claiming to be very fast for not having anemia like the other student. Without the slightest patience for that little show, Jinyong judges the girl's attitude with pure contempt. Like an uncontrolled bull, the girl in the yellow jacket advances at full speed toward her opponent. The teenager raises his fist, sweating cold, feeling that a real rolling rock is coming to run him over. The girl arrives very close with much fury, celebrating that she finally caught the cursed brat. Preparing her special attack, the classmate focuses totally on his legs and announces her low kick. The main guy is caught totally by surprise by the speed and aggressiveness of that sudden movement. At that critical instant, the beautiful girl opens the nearby gate, complaining about the loud noise and wanting to know what is happening. Without time to break, the girl in the yellow jacket's kick hits the newcomer's leg with a brutal impact. The victim of the strike remains completely paralyzed, just processing the absurd pain she just suffered. Seeing the tremendous tragedy she just caused, the aggressor freezes in place and lets out a murmur of terror. Xianwu falls to the ground holding her bruised ankle, while the aggressor screams the victim's name in complete despair. The main guy goes into total shock seeing the tragic scene that just happened. Trying to run to help the student, he ends up slipping ridiculously on the smooth floor. With the slip, the guy loses his balance totally and is thrown backward in the middle of the hallway. The impact is so strong he ends up falling face first on the floor, breaking his own nose in the fall. With that, the three teenagers are left thrown on the school floor, forming a completely pathetic scene. The girl in the yellow jacket remains paralyzed with embarrassment, not knowing how to fix that disaster. Already inside the school nurse's office, the culprit apologizes repeatedly for the absurd accident she caused. The two wounded end up resting side by side on the site's stretchers to recover from the pain. The young woman comments that the aggressive classmate was always a bit weird, but guarantees she already feels much better. Realizing he was left alone with the girl again, the teenager immediately calls for his imaginary partner. Jason appears quietly sipping a cup of tea, warning his friend not to let his weird side dominate the situation. Focused on the mission, Jinyoung reviews mentally that he needs to maintain absolute calm at this moment alone with the classmate. He begs himself, hoping not to speak any embarrassing nonsense this time. Breaking the long silence, Seonwoo turns on the mattress and asks quietly what the lunch menu will be. The student tries to remember the menu and answers somewhat awkwardly, leaving the classmate quite excited about the meal. Sitting on the edge of the stretcher, he warns he usually skips breakfast, making the girl notice he must be famished. She vents that she prefers to leave very early because she finds it very uncomfortable to be near her own father in the mornings. Trying to act like a good listener, the teenager advises the classmate to try to improve that complicated family relationship. But suddenly, the main guy's mind is taken over by a totally random memory about the commotion from earlier. He recalls his fateful first encounter with the young woman, where he let it slip without wanting to that she was too beautiful. On that occasion, the poor guy tried to convince himself that the confession was only for being out of practice with female faces. Staring at the classmate lying nearby, he finally throws in the towel and admits to himself that she is simply wonderful. Noticing the fixed gaze, the student breaks into a super teasing smile and asks if she is too beautiful for him to handle. The guy goes into pure despair right away, shaking his hands desperately while trying to invent a lame excuse. With his face completely red and heart racing, Jinyoung realizes he became the main target of her jokes. Laughing a lot at that exaggerated reaction, the beautiful girl adjusts on the bed stating she loves teasing the classmate. He remains totally confused by the direct declaration, while the young woman guarantees she is being 100% sincere. The student jokes that any little nudge is enough to make him freak out and let out the most bizarre phrases in the world. Being consumed by embarrassment, the main guy lowers his head asking for forgiveness, but she soon warns he doesn't need to apologize. With an incredibly gentle smile, Seonwoo confesses without any detour that she finds his clumsy way very cute. The profound impact of that compliment leaves the teenager paralyzed, making him question if his imaginary partner was always right. At that, a memory of his counselor formulating the great theory about the student's visual immunity resurfaces in his mind. The mustached big guy explains with a very serious posture that the true reason for this anomaly is extremely simple. The great deduction points out that the main guy simply fell head over heels for the young woman at first sight. Taking his cup of tea with total elegance, Jason reinforces that there is no other logical explanation for this event. Little by little, a reflective silence takes over the infirmary while the teenager absorbs the weight of this internal revelation. Outside, time passes slowly through the school courtyard during the long recovery period of the wounded. Later in the hallways, the girl in the yellow jacket grabs the main guy from behind, announcing the time for the real lesson. Seonwoo appears quite irritated, demanding the classmate take the blame, while the guy begs desperately to be released. Totally furious at the injustice, the beautiful student advances shouting, prepared to resolve that problem with brute force. Without thinking twice, she lands an accurate kick on the cowardly aggressor, generating a frightening impact. Stuck in the middle of the crossfire, poor Jinyoung is thrown backward without managing to process the sudden brawling. Fallen on the floor, the teenager questions the theory of love at first sight, doubting he really feels something so strong like that. Still confused about his own feelings, he stares at the student's back and murmurs her name with much uncertainty. Suddenly, a terrifying vision attacks the guy's mind, where the beautiful young woman stares at him with an expression of pure disgust and contempt. In the terrible hallucination, the student distills cruel words, calling the classmate a complete pathetic loser without any value. Jinyoung wakes up with a start in the middle of the early morning, totally panting and trembling after experiencing this horrifying nightmare. Pulling in air with much force, the guy tries to calm his heartbeats, accepting that everything was just a bad dream. The imaginary partner appears sitting on the chair wearing blue pajamas, noting that the friend is clearly out of breath. Totally dejected, the the teenager stares at the dark floor of the room and confesses the nightmare where he was hated by the girl. Jason deduces that old rejection traumas are returning to haunt his mind, a theory that makes quite a bit of sense. The poor guy reveals that this same scary nightmare has been repeating for several nights in a row, leaving the big guy quite intrigued. He laments that the night terror started right after the creation of that great theory about love at first sight. Raising a finger, the counselor analyzes that, if the passion is really true, the friend is suffering from a platonic love. With a quite serious posture, the muscular partner warns that this crushing feeling in the student's chest is just fear. Trying to help, Jason raises his thumb excitedly and recites an old war proverb about the importance of knowing the enemy. The next day at school, the teenager translates the crazy advice, concluding he needs to investigate the student's life. Walking firmly through the hallways, he realizes he knows nothing about her and thinks this spy tactic is perfect. After a short walk, the main guy stops at the door of room number 5, the official territory where the beautiful young woman studies. Peeking cautiously through the door, the guy confesses his nervousness while Jason tells him to stop shaking like a coward. The main guy sweeps the entire interior of the classroom with his eyes, analyzing meticulously each desk in search of his target. Frustrated upon noticing the young woman's absence in the middle of the crowd, he raises the hypothesis of her having taken a quick trip to the bathroom. Willing to get any kind of useful information, Jinyoung calls the attention of the first student he finds in front of him. The chubby classmate stares at the intruder with an expression of pure boredom, complaining that he is blocking the path to his desk. Caught by surprise by the sudden lack of manners, the teenager blinks a few times trying to process the terrible mood. Trying to avoid commotion early on, he apologizes and steps to the side, allowing the arrogant student to pass. The imaginary counselor clenches his teeth in hatred, declaring his uncontrollable desire to break the face of that smug brat. With much calm, Jinyoung points to the neighbor chair and asks if the chubby classmate knows where the mysterious student hid herself. Adjusting his own glasses with arrogance, the boy murmurs that having idiots looking for her there is something very common. In a tone of pure mockery, the student harshly criticizes the brats who fall blindly in love with a type of woman so superficial. The main guy closes his expression right away, feeling a deep disgust for that macho and totally disrespectful speech. Losing his mind completely, the big guy draws a giant machine gun, while the guy begs mentally for patience. Almost letting out a heavy swear word, the teenager takes a deep breath and demands again that the student answer the cursed question fast. Without demonstrating the slightest interest in helping, the chubby boy mocks, claiming that it is impossible to track someone who says so many bizarre things. Jinyoung warns coldly the chubby classmate not to speak ill of the beautiful girl in the school hallways. The boy in glasses murmurs with pure mockery that the teenager is also at his worst because of her. With that, the main guy stands up and tells the classmate to stand, stating he has something important for him. Complaining of pure laziness, Juman stands from the chair thinking all that movement very tiring. Taking advantage of the perfect gap, Jinyoung attacks his opponent fiercely using his own jacket as a weapon. With the sudden impact, the blow hits the arrogant guy's face square on. Without managing to defend himself from the fabric, he takes another violent blow that makes him stagger backward. The relentless attack continues, punishing the gossip classmate without the slightest pity inside the room. At that exact moment, Seonwoo opens the class door, questioning the bizarre noise of a pig suffering in the location. The young woman greets the teenager normally, while he freezes in surprise to see her right there. Desperate to justify himself, the guy explains quickly that he is beating up the chubby guy for having cursed her. Surprisingly, the student authorizes the beating without problems, stating that the student always acts inconveniently. Juman grumbles, wanting to understand the reason for so much gratuitous hatred, while the main guy just hides his anger. The beautiful girl reveals in a totally relaxed way that she and the assaulted are longtime friends. The teenager repeats the information completely in shock at the revelation, while the beaten classmate trembles with fear. Time passes quietly, and the dust finally settles after the great violent commotion in the classroom. Already sitting together on a bench, Jinyoung apologizes for the aggression, and the boy guarantees it didn't even hurt for real. The main guy tries to confirm the history of the old friendship, and Jiumin relates that the two know each other since 3 years of age. With that, the teenager concludes that this is the perfect chance to investigate the young woman's life in depth and unravel the great mystery. However, the classmate warns directly that he should give up as fast as possible if he is interested in the student. Jumin explains that the girl is insanely popular and attracts a crowd of interested guys at school all the time. Despite all this tremendous fame, the boy emphasizes that the success rate of romantic suitors is totally zero. The teenager murmurs that he already imagined that high popularity due to the great number of followers on her social network. He suggests that perhaps none of those guys was the girl's ideal type, and the chubby boy agrees with the possibility. Intrigued by the answer, Jinyoung questions the true reason for the classmate to have told him to give up so easily on the girl. Jumin recalls the long childhood, explaining that he always ended up attending the very same school as the old friend. Spending so much time together in youth, things ended up changing in a strange way during the middle school era. The chubby boy narrates a specific moment where he called the friend through the hallways, using a swear word completely normal between them. With his usual lazy attitude, he told the girl to go buy bread in the canteen if she had nothing to do there. However, the unusual reaction the boy received from that fateful day left him totally paralyzed and scared. The young woman just called his name, making the boy feel that there was something very wrong with her personality. Despite smiling exactly as she always did, the classmate relates that she no longer seemed like the gentle girl from before. Until today, Jumin guarantees that this creepy and somewhat macabre feeling about the friend's behavior never disappeared for real. The chubby boy concludes that this bizarre instinct is the great reason to advise the classmate's romantic withdrawal. Intrigued by the story, Jinyoung questions what exactly would be this creepy feeling cited in the girl's past. Walking back through the school hallway, the teenager reflects that he never felt any bad energy coming from the passionate girl. He then decides to ignore completely that dramatic warning, treating everything as a simple personal opinion of the gossip. Suddenly, the pair interrupts their steps when the chubby boy notices something very interesting happening right ahead. Nearby, Sianwoo appears walking calm with her friend, who soon questions the unusual approach of the two guys. Jumin chats with his old childhood companion, while the main guy tries to invent a good excuse for being there. Without any filter, the lazy classmate shoots bluntly that they were talking ill of her just now behind her back. The main guy enters an absolute panic with the betrayal, questioning mentally what the big psychological problem of that boy is. An awkward silence dominates the hallway until the student questions the truthfulness of the friend's absurd speech. She stares at Jinyoung, wanting to confirm the terrible gossip, forcing the teenager to deny the story as fast as possible. The meddlesome classmate bursts into laughter, teasing the nervous guy, while Sianwoo promptly refuses the great lie launched. Ignoring the mood completely, the chubby classmate insists on the heavy teasing and states he spoke ill of the young woman without pity. Losing totally the little patience that remained, Jinyoung attacks the boy with his jacket, telling him to shut up urgently. Without time to react to defend himself, the insolent classmate takes another violent blow right in the middle of his own face. With the relentless impact of the clothing, the chubby boy gets beaten repeatedly in the middle of the school hallway without being able to escape. Jason appears imaginarily armed with an immense machine gun, approving the aggression to protect the girl's honor. The classmate remains without understanding absolutely anything of the brawl, while Sianwoo turns her back, telling them to ignore the pair. Walking calmly away from the ridiculous commotion, the beautiful girl opens a small, very enigmatic smile on her face. The long school day finally reaches its end, with the soft sunlight bathing the huge main building of the school. Already walking through the very quiet streets of the residential neighborhood, the main guy concludes that his current situation is terrible. Totally frustrated with the mission, he laments not having discovered anything useful and blames the talkative classmate for the new misunderstanding. Recalling the creepy talk about the dark instinct of the young woman, the guy promises himself that he will crush the chubby guy. Interrupting the angry reflection in the middle of the walk, someone touches his shoulder, calling his name very excitedly. The beautiful student appears stuck to his side with a big smile, demanding some explanations about the malicious gossip. The poor guy takes a gigantic scare from the stealthy approach and stutters her name, caught totally unprepared on the sidewalk. Without breath from the monumental scare, the guy grumbles mentally about those scary and very sudden appearances. Finding much fun in the colleague's pure despair reaction, the young student lets out a super teasing and cute giggle. Jinyoung returns to deny any kind of gossip about her, but the girl soon reassures him, warning she already has awareness of it. Giving a comrade pat on his back, she guarantees she trusts the guy would never curse her that bad way behind her back. Changing the subject abruptly in the middle of the street, the girl tells him to accompany her home because she is out of bus money again. Completely exhausted, the main guy sighs heavily just imagining the great suffering to climb that long neighborhood hill. He reflects in silence that he didn't speak ill of her, but he really was trying to discover all her secrets earlier today. To avoid any kind of extra problem, Jinyong decides to keep the plan a secret and just agrees, stuttering very nervously. Letting out another long sigh of deep emotional defeat, the teenager just accepts his terrible, exhausting destiny of the day. Stopped exactly in front of the neighborhood's famous giant hill, the beautiful girl complains openly that she hates climbing streets very much. The student doubts ironically that the small inclination is that difficult, irritating the girl a lot with his ignorance. She lists intensely all the physical pains and shortness of breath the cursed anemia causes, leaving the guy feeling pity for the disease. Using the brilliant medical excuse in her favor, the young woman demands the guy go, pushing her back during the entire steep path. Without demonstrating the slightest patience for stalling, the student forces the confused classmate to rest his hands on her back right now. Trembling from pure nervousness from the physical contact, the guy rests both hands with extreme care on the classmate's delicate back. Pushing the girl uphill like a good motor, he checks if the job is working and she celebrates the relief in the walk. With the exhausting walk, the student gives a little laugh, warning that the contact is tickling him. The main guy gets tense and stutters, asking about it. The girl confirms the sensation quietly, explaining she is a bit sensitive when people touch her back. With that, the guy goes into mental panic, finding the situation terrible because of those teasing games from the classmate. The teenager reflects in silence for a brief instant, pondering a great possibility in his mind. In his imagination, the young woman appears like a delicate flower. Jinyong thinks it would be great if they were close enough to have a more casual relationship. Advancing in the delusion, he dreams of the day he would be climbing that hill carrying the beautiful girl on his back. The muscular counselor applauds the romantic imagination, finding everything very cute. The student soon agrees with his friend. Keeping the pose, Jinyong states that this level of daydreaming is acceptable, since he isn't imagining the names of future grandchildren. Jason supports his partner, saying he is free to dream whatever he wants. Suddenly, a voice breaks the illusion, calling the guy's name. Seonwoo shouts the classmate's name, desperate, complaining that he is pushing too fast and she will end up dying. The poor guy gets startled by the jolt. Desperate, the student apologizes without stopping, confessing he ended up getting distracted for a second. The girl tries to catch her breath. However, the guy paralyses quickly upon noticing the environment around and noticing something surprising. Stopped at the top of the hill, the view of the city illuminated by the sunset reveals itself impressive, making Jinyong admire the landscape. He comments it is very good to have such an open view, deducing that this must be the neighborhood where the young woman lives. Upon noticing a specific detail nearby, the teenager blinks, confused, and questions what that would be. Fascinated by the view, Jinyong admits he never knew of the existence of a place like that near home. The young woman is surprised by it being his first time there. The guy reinforces that such height isn't ideal for a patient with chronic anemia to be climbing, and the student agrees promptly. The girl states she is exhausted because of him and still needs to walk home. In a joking tone, she threatens the classmate before apologizing. The teenager just watches in silence, processing all the beauty of that quiet moment. Already at the viewpoint, the main guy warns he will let the exhaustion pass just this time, since she presented such a cool location. But the guy's attention is completely stolen by another thing soon after. With the soft wind, Seonwoo agrees the city landscape is really very beautiful. Fascinated, the student can't look away and remains totally amazed by her presence. That tense warning from Jumin about the young woman possessing a dark instinct echoes back in his mind, but Jinyong remains unable to understand anything. With eyes focused on the classmate, he deduces that if not managing to see anything other than her is something weird, then he was also infected. To solve this, the teenager looks away and decides to break the silence to resolve a pending issue. Jinyong calls the girl's name with a more serious tone, making the student turn to pay attention. Without managing to hide the truth, he confesses that he really talked about her with the chubby classmate earlier, leaving the young woman surprised. She questions if the guy spoke ill of her for real. Desperate, the teenager waves his hands, denying any kind of malicious gossip. To explain himself, the main guy reveals he just ended up discovering about the old childhood friendship between the two. Full of embarrassment, the guy admits he took that attitude because he really wanted to know more details about her. The beautiful student remains visibly surprised by the colleague's sincerity, staring at him without saying a word. With a heavy mood, Jinyong explains that the talk ended up seeming like gossip behind her back, but swears on his own life he didn't say anything bad. Very tense, he vents that he just didn't want the young woman to have a misunderstanding about his character. After the vent, a moment of silence installs itself while the girl processes all those intense words. With a gentle smile, Xianwu understands the situation and warns him not to worry about nonsense, guaranteeing she already forgot the subject. Relieved, the teenager asks if it is really true. The student confirms excited and suggests they return to the path home. Worried about her health, the guy questions if she can go down the hill alone, but the young woman guarantees she doesn't have any problem. From afar, Xianwu thanks him for the company up to there and says goodbye, while Jinyang returns the wave somewhat awkwardly. Alone on the street, the teenager lets out the air heavily, seeming that all his energy was sucked out at once. The imaginary partner appears pensive on the chair, analyzing that the student's reaction is really very difficult to decipher. The student starts to doubt himself, questioning if he really needed to have been so sincere. Jason questions the friend's hesitation. The muscular big guy understands his partner's side, but advises that sometimes it is better to stay quiet and let problems pass. While the girl follows her way back, the counselor reflects on what exactly would be passing through her head. Through the deserted street, the student walks with a very calm posture, keeping her own thoughts in secret. The main guy remains submerged in his regrets, ruminating on his own passionate justification of wanting to know her better. Elsewhere, the young woman walks pensive and reflects that Jinyang has the strange talent of hitting her heart out of nowhere with those lines. The student continues her solitary journey through the extensive street of the residential neighborhood, seeming very calm. But soon the disease's lie takes its toll, and the girl collapses on her knees on the sidewalk, complaining that she is completely out of breath. A new school day begins with the sun shining bright over the huge educational complex of the school. The imaginary partner appears suddenly, demonstrating great surprise with an unprecedented attitude of his friend. In sports clothing, Jinyang confirms to Jason that he is going to play soccer after a long time stopped. The muscular friend approves the idea, encouraging the teenager to sweat the shirt to become a real man on the field. In the middle of the confident walk, the guy notices a problem on the ground and stops abruptly. His sports shoelace ended up coming loose suddenly in the middle of the hallway. Without thinking twice, he crouches quickly to tie his footwear before continuing the path. However, someone almost trips over the guy crouching and lets out a furious grunt of surprise. A terrifying-looking figure questions his audacity to crouch in the way and calls the teenager's name in a threatening tone. The person named Han Jiol warns she almost fell to her death and asks if the main guy has a death wish. Totally paralyzed with terror on the ground, the student stutters Han Jiol's name, realizing the imminent danger. The scary figure grabs the guy's head firmly, telling him to lower his gaze immediately, leaving him confused. The teenager asks the reason for that bizarre order, and Han Jiol questions if he really needs an explanation for that. Without the slightest pity, Han Jiol states he looks very ugly seen from below, and girls hate being stared at from that angle. With an intimidating posture, the person warns that that situation is embarrassing and offends the main guy without pity. Upon walking away, the adult tells the guy never to stop out of nowhere in the middle of the path again. Jinyang remains thrown on the floor, processing the terrible, gratuitous humiliation he just suffered. The teenager reflects that that doesn't matter since he saw the person as a gloomy rock. He fears that answering would cause his death. In the middle of the rock girls, he concludes the delusion was born solely from his deep fear of being rejected. To ensure he would never go through the pain of rejection again, he decided he needed to distance himself from everything. Supported by his imaginary friend, the guy focused blindly on self-development, training his body and studying hard to be better. As a result of so much continuous effort, Jinyang lands an extremely powerful kick on the soccer ball during the match. The impact is so strong the goalkeeper doesn't have the slightest chance of defense, and the ball bulges the net in an impressive wonder goal. The teammates celebrate the move with excitement, hugging the main guy and thanking him for being on the same team. Excited, Juman shouts that they will crush the rival team that way, while Jinyang just watches the chubby guy in silence. But the main guy's attention is quickly diverted when he hears a familiar voice and notices Xianwu's approach. The friend comments about the guys playing soccer while complaining about the smell of sweat in the room. Soon after, she points excitedly that Jinyang is also in the middle of the match. With that, a group of students sighs in admiration watching the game from afar. Sitting in the bleachers, the girls agree that the teenager stands out quite a bit. Watching attentively the movement, Sunwoo calls the classmate's name in her thoughts. The classmate emphasizes that the guy is very quiet, but gains a cool air practicing sports. She even praises the student's attractive energy, while Sunwoo finds those fans somewhat embarrassing. Intrigued by so much popularity, the friend questions the reason for so much success. The beautiful girl ponders the subject, thinking all that charm is an enormous exaggeration. Immediately, Sunwoo's mind recalls the extremely clumsy and fearful attitudes of the guy, making her hold back a laugh. But in the end, the young woman ends up admitting internally that he really has his charm. The school bell rings loudly, announcing the end of the match and the good work of all students. The teammates celebrate the great victory thanks to Jinyoung's talent and agree to play again the next day. Exhausted, the main guy decides to wash up at the external sink before returning to the classroom. The student turns on the faucet and lets the water run to cool off from the intense heat. Refreshing his face in the cold water, Jinyoung tries to catch his breath after so much physical effort. Right next to him, Jiumin praises the classmate's impressive kick during the match. The chubby boy confesses he never imagined there existed someone capable of scoring against his defense. Drying his face, the main guy returns the compliment stating the classmate was a great goalkeeper. Without a single shred of joy, Jiumin warns he is feeling very wronged by all that. Making a mystery, the boy questions if Jinyoung knows the dark side of soccer, but the teenager just ignores him. The chubby classmate complains that the goalkeeper always takes all the blame when the team ends up losing. He explains the frustration of defending several kicks and failing on one, revealing he hates the main guy for that. Jinyoung questions the reason without understanding anything, and the goalkeeper confesses the big problem was not having managed to block that goal. Revolted by the audacity, Jason appears armed with an axe, forcing the teenager to ask for calm to his imaginary friend. Taking advantage of the water in his hand, Jinyoung warns quietly that he has a special gift for the lazy classmate. In a quick movement, he throws all the cold water directly in the chubby boy's face. Jiumin takes a huge scare from the sudden bath, while the guy provokes his exaggerated reaction. Furious at the prank, the chubby boy curses the teenager as a lunatic and promises to return it in the same coin. The two start a real water war in the courtyard, splashing liquid everywhere like kids. Far away, the friend notices Jinyoung running after Jiumin and shouting threats about boiling pork meat. Sunwoo remains without understanding right, warning she cannot hear the shouting at a distance. Curious about the commotion, the friend pulls the beautiful student to go check up close what the two are plotting. Totally exhausted from the water war, the two guys stop in the middle of the courtyard pulling in air with much difficulty. Jinyoung grumbles he is feeling disgusting and with his clothes completely soaked because of the classmate. The chubby boy suggests without the slightest shame that they simply take off their shirt to wring the fabric right there. Losing patience, the teenager warns he is going to beat up the classmate after school and starts taking off his clothes. Suddenly, Sunwoo's voice echoes through the courtyard asking what the two are still doing out of the room. The main guy freezes in place and takes a gigantic scare upon noticing the young woman's presence right at that moment. The two girls are visibly surprised to find the classmate standing there shirtless. While the friend stares at Jinyoung's defined abs, Sunwoo focuses her gaze directly on Jiumin's belly. The chubby classmate goes into shock upon realizing that the beautiful girl is staring at his exposed paunch. The students stare at the chubby boy's completely lamentable scene with a vibe of pure judgment. Regretful of the invitation, the chubby boy apologizes to the classmate and calls his own situation a view of hell. The boy puts on his shirt, cursing the classmates in silence, under the attentive and mute gaze of the main guy. Jinyoung enters mental despair upon noting that Sunwoo just saw him shirtless in the middle of the school. Without thinking twice, he applies an arm lock on the chubby guy, blaming the cursed one for all that embarrassment. Time passes, and the next morning brings an agitated mood to the school's main courtyard during classes. During a new match, the main guy concentrates all his strength and lands a direct kick to the goal. But this time, Jiumin defends the ball with extreme ease, grabbing the kick without the slightest effort. The teenager is completely in shock to see that his attack was stopped so simply. Displaying the ball in his hands, the chubby goalkeeper gloats about the perfect defense against the team's top scorer. Maintaining possession of the ball, the classmate questions in a taunting tone what is wrong with Jinyoung today. The guy curses his own lack of skill on the day, complaining he is kicking like a weakling. Sitting on the bench, Jason notes his friend doesn't seem to be in good shape today, and the teenager agrees fully. Discouraged with the performance, Jinyoung warns the first half is over and decides to take a quick break. He walks exhausted to the bleachers and sits on the stone steps to rest his legs a little. Pulling in air with difficulty, the guy tries to recover the energy spent in that first half of the game. Someone notices the student's tiredness and comments he seems very exhausted, making him look quickly. Sunwoo appears with a super friendly posture, greeting the classmate while approaching the bleachers. Caught totally by surprise by the sudden appearance, Jinyoung stutters the beautiful student's name. Soon the penny drops and the guy lets out a scream of pure terror, scared by the girl's dangerous proximity. Without giving explanations, he jumps quickly to the lower steps of the bleachers, leaving the young woman very confused. She soon questions the weird attitude, while the teenager confirms in his thoughts that an old lesson was absolutely right. His mind travels through time, admitting he never understood the reason for her looking like a rock in his visual delusion. Jinyoung turns his face away, feeling absurd embarrassment upon seeing her real beauty from that unfavorable angle. Intrigued by the retreat, Sunwoo asks if he doesn't want to look at her face, forcing the guy to deny the misunderstanding. The teenager explains the old rule that people usually look very ugly when observed from bottom to top. Finding the justification funny, the student leans her body and asks in a teasing tone if she really looks ugly. In the heat of the moment, Jinyoung ends up being too sincere and states she looks even more beautiful from that angle. Silence takes over the scene as soon as the teenager realizes the gravity of the confession he just let out without thinking. The beautiful young woman just murmurs agreeing with the compliment, while a heavy flirtatious vibe hangs in the air. The guy starts sweating cold from nervousness, cursing his own big mouth for having said something so direct. Jason appears sitting in the darkness, congratulating his friend with irony for having fallen right into the girl's charm trap. Not knowing how to fix the situation, Jinyoung cries for help to his imaginary partner, who just praises the romantic response. Without the slightest desire to help, Jason warns the partner will have to handle this one alone. Jinyoung grabs his own head, lamenting the blunder, while the counselor notes that trying to fix it will only make everything worse. Faced with that unexpected confession, a long silence takes over the student. However, she soon rests her face on her hand, demonstrating she is finding the situation very fun. Trying to distract, the main guy gives a fake cough and thanks the previous compliment, realizing fast that the tactic was terrible. The young woman recalls he only prays to please, while the teenager wonders tense if she will let the subject die. Quietly, Sunwoo guarantees that receiving compliments is always very good, and the guy agrees right away. With that, she comments she always hears the other students calling the classmate cool and sexy through the hallways. Caught by surprise, Jinyoung waves his hands in pure despair, denying having that kind of fame at school. Leaning her body forward, the student doubts his modesty and confesses she agrees totally with the other girls. The impact of the declaration leaves the teenager without reaction, stuttering when asking in which aspect she finds him attractive. Making a teasing suspense, the beautiful young woman just agrees mysteriously before giving the final answer. Immediately, the student's mind creates a fantasy where he appears super muscular and shirtless in the middle of the courtyard. Soon after, the girl waves her hand, lightly breaking the tension of that mood. In a super teasing tone, Sunwoo approaches quite a bit and warns she finds him incredible in absolutely every sense. Completely disarmed by the advance, the teenager remains paralyzed and with his face burning from embarrassment. Even the student herself looks away, slightly embarrassed by the boldness of what she just said. The romantic bubble bursts when Jumin shouts from afar, warning that the second half of the match is about to begin. The main guy turns his face confused upon hearing the classmate calling his name in the middle of the courtyard. Sitting comfortably on the bleachers, Sunwoo raises her voice and cheers excitedly for him to score another goal. Already positioned in the middle of the field, the guy watches the young woman from afar while getting ready for the game's restart. In his thoughts, Jinyoung confesses to his imaginary partner that he has no clue about the reason. Dominating the ball with ease, he admits he was totally unwilling to play during the first half. Advancing fast through the field and leaving the opponents behind, the guy feels his own body incredibly light. Scratching his mustache with tranquility, Jason feigns confusion, asking how such a sudden change happened. Confident, the big guy states his friend already knows very well the true answer to this mystery. The counselor points out that all that sudden energy appeared simply because the beautiful girl is watching the game. Assuming a more serious posture, Jason hesitates a bit for having to go against the own advice he gave before. Maintaining calm, the imaginary friend suggests perhaps things can follow a different path now. With absurd energy, Jinyoung lands a devastating kick that sends the ball straight to the back of the net. The muscular friend concludes that perhaps the teenager's small romantic fantasies aren't a bad idea in the end. The entire team vibrates with emotion at the spectacular wonder goal, congratulating the top scorer for the incredible move. Contagious by the victory and the compliments, Jinyoung lets out a sincere laugh of pure joy in the middle of the field. Far away, Sunwoo asks the defeated goalkeeper not to be upset, but the boy swears he will never forgive her. Ignoring the classmates' drama, the young woman demonstrates she is finding that whole situation incredibly fun. Watching the scene from afar, the main guy celebrates mentally his absurd success in the match. He notes she looks even more beautiful today, while Jason provokes saying the brat has a lot of luck. Time passes fast, and a new day dawns quite calm in the city's residential neighborhood. Walking through his own house hallway with his school uniform, Jinyoung comes across an argument in the living room. The teenager stops confused near the entrance, questioning what his parents are wanting to say with that conversation. Sitting at the table, his mother complains about an unforeseen event at work that will prevent the couple from using the purchased tickets. Without knowing what to do with the entries, she suddenly notices the son's presence nearby and calls his attention. The guy warns he is already leaving for school, but his mother soon asks worried if he already had breakfast. He tries to invent he will have a quick snack on the way, receiving a scolding for not feeding properly. With that, a loud growl appears in the student's stomach, forcing the poor guy to admit he is dying of hunger. Already sitting at the table eating the stew, the guy reflects that meals with his father always have a somewhat heavy mood. Enjoying an imaginary refined banquet, Jason advises his partner to eat properly and strengthen himself. His mother remembers the tickets she got from the neighbor and offers for her son to enjoy the weekend. Grabbing the 2 entries for a theater play, the student listens to the suggestion of inviting some friend to go along. His father clears his throat frustrated, lamenting that the family outing was ruined by excess work. Already on the way to school, Jinyoung stares at the theater entries in his hands with much doubt. Pressed by the situation, he breaks his head trying to decide who would be the ideal person to accompany him on the outing. In his imagination, one of the classmates from the room refuses the invitation right away, inventing an excuse that he is sick. Another student from the sports club also appears in the delusion, rejecting the offer for being very busy with training. To complete, his mind projects Juman stating with contempt that theater plays are not of his interest. Back to reality in the school courtyard, the teenager is left totally lost without knowing what to do. Walking beside Juman, the main guy comments he didn't even try inviting the classmate because he thought he only liked anime. The classmate makes a face right away and gets very offended, guaranteeing he doesn't even watch that type of cartoon. Without understanding anything of that aggressive reaction, Jinyoung watches the boy turn his back and go away straight to the canteen. Crossing his arms in the hallway, the teenager wonders where he got the crazy idea the classmate was addicted to anime. Sitting quietly on the courtyard wall, Jason philosophizes about the danger of stereotypes while his friend asks for help. The muscular counselor questions what the next step will be since all the guy's main options were discarded. With pure nervousness, the student laughs in a strange way, repeating the question about who he should invite to go out. Staring at the guy in a very intimidating way, the big guy tells him to stop stalling and be totally honest with himself. The teenager retreats frightened when his partner hits the nail on the head, saying his real desire is to call Sunwoo. Stuttering a lot, Jinyoung tries to deny the statement, but the friend points out he lost his fear and can't think of another person. Jason decrees it's time to make a final decision, while the teacher approaches silently from behind. Suddenly, the woman interrupts the mental debate, calling the student's full name in the middle of the path. With a quite serious posture, the teacher demands education, asking if the student won't greet her properly. The main guy recognizes her as Han Jeol and apologizes fast, while she comments he was talking to himself there. Narrowing his eyes analytically, the woman asks bluntly if he has the habit of creating imaginary friends. The impact of that accurate question leaves the poor guy in absolute panic, without understanding how she discovered his biggest secret. After the tense approach, the two end up sitting side by side on an isolated courtyard bench to talk better. The teacher questions if he is trying to take a specific girl to the theater play, and the guy confirms defeated. She then mentions Sunwoo's name, commenting about the young woman's popularity, leaving the student shocked by the discovery. Totally in shock, the student stutters, asking how the teacher knows about Sunwoo. Hanjeol jokes, stating she heard all the gossip yesterday, citing even the embarrassing compliment he made to the girl. Changing the tone of the conversation suddenly, the woman maintains a much more serious posture. Without stalling, the teacher deduces that the guy is dying of fear of being rejected. Jinyoung looks away completely defeated and admits that that is the shameful truth. He tries to justify himself, saying that inviting the young woman in front of everyone is basically calling her for a date. The teenager compliments, stating that such an attitude would be practically a romantic confession. Even hearing the excuses, the teacher calls him a very cowardly brat. Exuding confidence, the woman warns that one day he will still thank her for that. Out of nowhere, Han Jiol raises her voice and calls by Sunwoo's name in the middle of the courtyard. The teacher warns out loud that the teenager has something important to say, telling the girl to approach. The main guy enters pure despair, without understanding where the young woman appeared there so suddenly. Without the slightest pity, the woman reveals he wants to take her to see a theater play on the weekend. The students' friends burst into laughter, mocking the guy for having used the teacher as a messenger. Han Jiol walks away quietly, telling the beautiful young woman to go talk to the teenager. Sunwoo approaches waving excitedly, while the poor guy feels the world collapsing. His mind recalls that this invitation is practically a declaration, while the girl asks about the play. Arriving very close, the young woman asks in a super cute tone if he really wants to go with her. The student remains completely paralyzed in front of that adorable scene. Sweating cold, he tries to formulate a decent response but only stutters. Totally hypnotized, the guy simply agrees automatically. The weekend finally arrives and the teenager waits anxious at the meeting point. With Jason on his shoulder, he reflects amazed that he really managed a date with the beautiful student. The imaginary friend gives a scolding, telling him to stop with that habit of accepting everything without thinking. Jinyoung ignores the sermon and asks if he looks very weird wearing contact lenses for the first time. Soon the student tries to focus and warns that his appearance isn't the most important now. Assuming his giant form, Jason questions what the guy's true goal is with the girl. The mustached big guy warns, crossing his arms, that it's time to make a final decision. The counselor analyzes the situation and states that the guy's romantic feelings are very evident. Jason deduces that, with this direct invitation, the young woman probably already realized his intentions. The muscular partner emphasizes that the teenager suffers from an extreme fear of being rejected. Jason warns that advancing without thinking can bring back that same terrifying nightmare of the past. Reflective, Jinyoung ponders that giving up these feelings now would spare him from his biggest fear. Frustrated, he questions his imaginary friend how on earth he will ignore something he's already feeling. A memory snaps in the guy's mind, while the big guy states he already did this before. The crazy idea of seeing the young woman as a mere stone statue comes up again. In a comforting tone, Jason calls his partner's attention. The friend warns that if the choice is to maintain the rock illusion out of fear, he will give the advice for that. Sunwoo appears walking wonderful on the street, while the big guy suggests the option of overcoming this trauma for good. The teenager remains completely amazed by the beauty of the girl approaching. The counselor guarantees he will support any decision and will do everything to help his old companion. The student stops in front of him, exuding charm to spare. The mood gets perfect between the two on the street, while Jason tells his partner to make his final choice. Jinyoung's mind travels to the past, remembering that romantic rejection is something everyone eventually experiences. The pain of that old trauma resurfaces strong with the memory of the first time he was kicked out. The main guy recalls childhood, admitting that the advice of turning women into rocks was genius. He reflects that the proximity between two people inevitably ends up generating romantic feelings. But maintaining the rock illusion, he can easily block any desire for closeness. Extending his hand toward nothing, the teenager deeply laments his own cowardice. Sunken in his dark memories, he confesses to having a paralyzing fear of being rejected again. Back to the present, inside a fancy coffee shop, the young woman calls the student's attention. Sunwoo finds it very funny and praises his sophisticated posture taking an espresso coffee. Trying not to seem arrogant, he explains he only ordered that drink because it was the cheapest on the menu. The student comments that 1 hour is left for the play, and the guy agrees, stating he is very anxious. Drinking a sip of strong coffee, his mind returns to debate the great dilemma launched by Jason. The poor guy concludes that maintaining emotional blocking is the only guarantee to avoid the rejection nightmare. On the other hand, trying to win the beautiful young woman's heart would require facing all the traumas head-on. Staring at his own cup, he doubts he has the necessary courage to take such an attitude. After all, the teenager spent years hiding behind this perfect psychological defense. Noticing the classmate's obvious distraction, Sunwoo asks what is going through his head. Caught by surprise, Jinyoung invents quickly that the horrible taste of the espresso left him somewhat airy. The young woman doesn't fall for the lame excuse, calling the classmate a liar right away. She complains he traveled far while he was there in front of her, telling him to order a hot chocolate next time. Out of nowhere, Sunwoo mentions the 2-hour period, leaving the student quite confused. The girl explains that this was exactly the time she spent getting all dressed up just to see him. Recalling the effort in front of the mirror, she says it took a long time to choose the perfect outfit. The student demands that he stop getting distracted for nothing after all the work she had. Leaning her body on the table, Sunwoo asks in a super captivating way for him to focus only on her. The teenager feels the weight of the scolding and admits internally he was very impolite on his part. Rising from the table, the girl warns she will forgive him this time only because he paid for the tickets. With the play's schedule approaching, she calls the classmate for them to go straight to the theater. Walking beside her, the guy decides to store his dilemmas in the drawer and enjoy the date. Already inside the huge theater, the classic scenery comes to life on stage in front of the audience. The main actress performs with great drama, questioning the heavens the reason her beloved is named Romeo. The actor hits back with a totally comical and irritated expression, responding that the fault is his own mother's. The theater play continues with a dramatic actor criticizing the female character for not knowing something so obvious. Totally immersed in history, Sunwoo praises the main guy while Jinyoung lets out a yawn of pure boredom. Walking out of there, the girl admires a stuffed animal in the machine, and the teenager soon offers himself to try to get it. But the attempt turns into a financial disaster with him spending $20 in a row without managing to fish anything. In the karaoke, Jinyoung sings super bad, which makes the student laugh a lot at that disastrous performance. Later, the two share a dessert in a coffee shop, and the guy gently cuts a piece of the cake for her. Already walking through the streets at night, the teenager tries to bring up the subject of her relationship with an old friend. The mood between the pair follows very calm while they walk side by side through the sidewalks illuminated by the neighborhood. Taking advantage of the night breeze, the two maintain a quiet rhythm on the long journey back home. Near the final destination, the student lets out a sigh of relief and comments that today's day was very fun. Sunwoo thanks him for the company to her residence, and the classmate responds that it wasn't any trouble at all. With that, he wishes she gets inside in safety, and the girl agrees promptly. However, the young woman remains standing right there staring at the teenager in total silence. The guy takes a scare from the pause, and the student asks if he doesn't have anything else to say at that moment. Sweating cold from nervousness, Jinyoung tries to confess how much he loved spending that whole time beside her. In his mind, the teenager wishes to express the desire to go out again only with her. Watching the classmate standing there, he hopes intimately that she accepts a next invitation. Noticing the guy's long trance, Sunwoo calls his name to bring him back to reality. Without courage to declare himself, Jinyoung just lets out an extremely forced and nervous laugh. Scratching his head awkwardly, he says goodbye saying he will see her at school, leaving the young woman very confused. Revolted by the stalling, she gives a little tap on the classmate questioning the reason for so much gratuitous insecurity. Turning his back soon after, the student warns she is really going away and ends the conversation. The main guy stands planted on the sidewalk, watching the girl move away slowly down the street. Starting his solitary walk, he laments not having managed to say he wanted to see her again. The student admits to himself that the fear of suffering a romantic rejection is still too strong. Creating pessimistic scenarios in his head, he enters panic imagining the classmate rejecting a new meeting. Jinyoung tries to convince himself that retreating is the safest option to avoid huge future discomfort. He rationalizes that outing wasn't even his idea, but a direct setup by teacher Han Jeol. The poor guy deduces in a very dramatic way that the girl only accepted going out from pure pressure of the situation. Decided not to repeat the trauma of the past, the guy promises to train to go back to seeing her as a rock. The teenager reinforces the own promise, agreeing he needs to raise this mental barrier as soon as possible. Suddenly, the student's voice echoes in his memory telling him to ask for something different from coffee next time. The guy interrupts his steps at the same instant, feeling the weight of those words coming back with force. Looking quickly back, he finds Sunwoo standing on the sidewalk staring at him from afar. With an adorable posture, the young woman suggests he try a coffee with chocolate in the next meeting. The impact of that phrase hits the main guy full force, leaving him completely without reaction. At that exact moment of tension, the imaginary counselor appears from nowhere bringing up the subject. Sitting face to face in the darkness of the mind, Jason questions if the decision to treat her as a rock is final. The muscular partner guarantees his unconditional support, accepting that flight is also a way of dealing with fear. Jinyoung calls the companion's name, recalling the moment he took that same decision 5 years ago. Discouraged with his own cowardice, the student asks how his image is at that exact moment. The big guy analyzes the situation and throws in his face that his friend needed third parties to manage a meeting. Jason lists mercilessly all the embarrassing distractions and fearful hesitations of the guy throughout that day. Pointing his finger, the counselor highlights the absurd fear the teenager feels of approaching the classmate. To finalize the painful sermon, the partner criticizes the idea of simply returning to seeing the young woman as a rock. Trying to ease the tense mood, the counselor apologizes for the harshness of the words, stating to be just realistic. Shrugging his shoulders, the muscular friend emphasizes that this is the purest truth about the whole situation. Jinyoung opens a small smile, conformed, and accepts internally he really is a big loser. Without thinking twice, he advances and holds firmly the classmate's hands in the middle of the street. Staring at the young woman directly in the eyes, the teenager calls Sunwoo's name with much conviction. The girl is surprised by the sudden physical contact and lets out a murmur of confusion. Breaking the silence, Jinyoung apologizes and promises to take her to a much better theater play next time. The guy justifies the invitation as a request for forgiveness, since today's outing was boring enough to make her sleep. The student processes the unexpected second invitation with an expression of total surprise on her face. Soon after, she closes her eyes and bursts into sincere laughter, finding the attitude very cute. Excited about the classmate's courage, Sunwoo confesses she was already waiting for him to say that for a good while. The teenager tries to explain himself better, guaranteeing again that the next destination will be much more fun. He laments once more the fact she fell asleep from so much boredom during today's presentation. The young woman blinks, confused with the repetition of the same awkward excuse in the middle of the conversation. But the guy's nervousness ends up being contagious, and she bursts into laughter again with the scene. Being totally sincere, the student confesses she was really waiting for this second romantic invitation. Suddenly, the euphoria passes, and the teenager notices a crucial detail in the pair's posture. He realizes he continued holding both of the girl's hands with much force throughout the chat. The shock hits Jinyoung at the same hour, making him let out a scream of pure despair for his own audacity. Letting go of the young woman quickly, he stutters, asking for forgiveness for the impulsive action while she asks for calm laughing. Very friendly, Sunwoo asks him to act with more naturalness next time, guaranteeing to be anxious for the meeting. Turning his back, happy of life, the girl tells him to arrive in safety, and the poor guy returns the wish. The student remains standing in place, touching his own chest with his heart racing after that intense moment. The beautiful student follows the way home with a light and extremely quiet posture. In one last adorable movement, she looks over her shoulder, exhibiting an immense peace. The dawn brings a new sunny day for the huge student complex of the city. Pulling in air with extreme difficulty, the main guy focuses all his attention on the physical exercise. The boy uses the park's iron bar to do several vigorous elevations. He confesses internally he always seeks the heavy training when he has much stuff occupying his head. Reliving the memory of the contact with her hands, Jinyoung tries to spend all that accumulated anxiety working out without stopping. Maintaining focus on the exercise, the main guy decides to overcome the fear of being rejected to manage to approach Sunwoo. Soon the imaginary partner praises the courageous attitude, receiving a quick thanks from the student. However, Jinyoung admits the task is very difficult and questions himself how on earth he will manage to create all that intimacy. Sukyoung appears suddenly, asking how many series are still missing, while the guy panting responds they are only 3. The teenager complains mentally that his own joints start to hurt whenever he tries to do that exercise. With that, the girl approaches quite a bit from behind and calls the classmate a brat. Jinyoung takes a monumental scare and asks desperate who she is, while the young woman just gives a teasing giggle. Maintaining a relaxed posture with her sports clothing, the classmate introduces herself, calling her own name. Sukyoung comments, excited about the great coincidence of bumping into the teenager right in that park. Still somewhat lost, the guy repeats her name, trying to process the information. The student's mind soon connects the dots, and he recognizes her as Sunwoo's friend, even under the visual effect of rock. Taking advantage of the moment, the classmate tells him to repeat the elevations on the bar, ignoring his confusion upon demanding obedience. Without much choice, Jinyoung agrees with the weird request and positions himself again on the park's equipment. But the girl lets out a scream of pure despair as soon as she watches the execution of the movement. Furious at the gloomy technique, Sukyoung pushes the teenager, questioning who would do an exercise that way. Fallen on the ground, the teenager massages his aching head and questions the reason for that gratuitous aggression. The girl warns that terrible execution will only destroy his joints instead of bringing health. Without losing time, Sukyoung tells the guy to wait right there while she goes to change clothes really fast. The student tries to argue that he still needs to finish the training, but she interrupts him with great impatience. Reinforcing the order in a very direct way, the classmate tells him to stay standing right there, making him agree right away. Alone near the exercise bar, Jinyoung is left without understanding what is the big problem of that girl. Suddenly, Jason appears with an imposing posture and warns that situation is a golden opportunity. The teenager questions the madness, while the big guy recalls the old war strategy about knowing the enemy. The counselor points out that this is the chance to get information about Sunwoo, just like they tried with that chubby classmate. Jason explains that before the idea was only to learn to deal with the young woman's charm, but now the focus is to approach her for real. Understanding the perfect tactic, Jinyoung deduces he should ask casual questions about the friend to Sukyoung. The student agrees with the plan, thinking the girl will certainly be much more useful than the chubby classmate from before. Little time after this mental conversation, the young woman returns to the park walking in a quite quiet way. Jinyoung notices the difference and asks about the clothes change, hitting quickly that the shoes and pants changed. Sukyoung gets irritated thinking he is wanting to pick a fight, but the guy apologizes stating she looks like a rock. Ignoring the guy's visual weirdness, the girl tells him to do an elevation on the bar for her to analyze the movement. Putting the plan in action, the student asks directly if Sukyoung is very close to her friend. The young woman confirms the friendship, thinking the question very sudden, but soon the penny drops and she understands everything. With a mischievous smile, Sukyoung hits the target square on and states the classmate is totally in love with Sunwoo. Jinyoung enters absolute panic, trying to deny the passion, inventing it was only a silly curiosity of the moment. The girl cuts the lame excuse right there, guaranteeing that even a random chicken would manage to notice that romantic interest. Pointing to a bird passing nearby, she mocks the situation while the guy questions where that animal came from. Sukyoung assumes a more serious tone and warns that conquering the friend's heart won't be an easy task at all. She agrees that the young woman's great popularity hinders the suitors quite a bit. With a pensive posture, the young woman tries to find the right words and defines the friend as someone very mysterious. Sukyoung explains that Sunwoo usually is incredibly friendly and sympathetic with absolutely everyone at school. The student emphasizes the two really spend most of the time together during the day. But despite all that intense closeness, the classmate confesses she still has no clue what passes through the friend's head. She reveals that even talking and joking all the time, Sunwoo almost never shares information about her personal life. With that, Sukyoung concludes the beautiful girl transmits the strong feeling of hiding many secrets from everyone around. Despite the mystery, she guarantees to be the young woman's best friend and advises the guy to prepare for much emotional commotion. Jinyoung recalls the chubby classmate said something very similar before, questioning if he is letting pass some important detail. The student loses patience, telling him to go to the bar already, while the guy reflects he never felt that bad energy coming from Sunwoo. Without warning, Sukyoung lands a kick on his back, telling him to stop daydreaming. The young woman sighs, panting, complaining about having to train the classmate and questions if he at least has a knack for sports. The teenager asks if he appears to be very weak, but the girl remembers he looks like a rock and it isn't possible to judge his strength. Decided to show service, the student takes off her sports jacket, revealing her training clothes. Sukyoung states with much confidence that she might look common, but does really well in physical exercises. Exuding charm in an imposing pose, the girl jokes, warning the classmate not to end up falling in love with her. The main guy stares at that whole demonstration of confidence with an expression of pure boredom and indifference. Due to his impenetrable mental barrier, the classmate remains looking like just a weird rock wearing gym clothes. Being extremely direct, the guy states she is very full of herself, which the young woman confirms without the slightest shame. Far away, the mood follows quite calm, with the movement of people walking through the wooded streets of the park. A little further ahead, a woman carries some shopping bags quietly through the wooded location. The physical education teacher walks along the walking track wearing comfortable clothes and accompanied by a student. Walking beside the teacher, the student calls attention, bringing up a very gossipy subject. The student asks if Han Jeol doesn't find one of the teachers secretly beautiful, surprising the woman with the taste for older men. Defending the teacher's beauty, the girl guarantees he hasn't even reached 30 years, while the woman mocks his appearance. The two suddenly notice Jinyoung and Sukyoung training nearby, and the student comments that that pair doesn't match at all. Han Jeol pulls the cap brim and watches the disastrous training of the students in total silence. Letting out a long sigh of frustration, the teacher loses patience and shouts, telling the guy to stop using momentum. Maintaining the gaze fixed on the scene, she evaluates the terrible technique of the teenager suffering on the bar. Sukyoung continues pushing Jinyoung's back, demanding that he use the right strength and hold firmly on both sides. The car driver girl shouts that only 3 repetitions remain, ignoring totally the pleas for clemency from the poor guy exhausted. Helping with her own weight, the young woman pushes the classmate upward in a tremendous effort to complete the movement. The physical education teacher just stares at that extreme and lamentable attitude completely without words. Losing her head at the partner's slowness, Sukyoung kicks the guy away, complaining he is driving her crazy. Without losing rhythm, the student assumes the front and grabs the iron bar with much firmness to give a practical class. Positioned on the equipment, she teaches the classmate that brute strength must be pulled solely through the back. Exuding all her athletic skill, the young woman executes the elevation in a perfect way, showing how it's done for real. Shocked, the guy questions if that is difficult and calls her a useless rock. Sukyoung grumbles, irritated, when he asks what is the difference of her movement to his. Watching the classmate on the bar, the teenager lets out an exclamation of surprise at her physical ability. Suddenly, Sunwoo appears out of nowhere, praising the friend with much excitement. Sukyoung takes a huge scare from the sudden arrival at the park. The main guy goes into shock to see the beautiful student running excitedly toward them, waving her hand. With that, Sukyoung asks what the friend is doing there. Jinyoung reflects in silence that the young woman always usually appears out of nowhere in places. The classmate explains she was just teaching the guy how to do the exercise right, finding it fun. Sunwoo comments the friend never resists giving advice. Changing the subject, the beautiful girl points to a rooster scratching nearby and finds the animal cute. Sukyoung admits she has no clue where the animal came from. With that, the attention of the newly arrived young woman ends up turning to the classmate, who is waiting in silence. She waves in a very friendly way, greeting the teenager. Sweating cold from nervousness, Jinyoung stutters, returning the greeting. Enchanted with the equipment, the student questions how they managed to do that, admitting that just hanging is very difficult for her. The guy soon recalls the classmate suffers from anemia. He questions if she is making fun of him and asks for apologies right after. Ignoring the comment, Sukyoung offers a little help in case the friend wants to try doing the exercise too. The young woman accepts the proposal, finding the idea fun. Taking advantage of the chance, the training classmate tells the teenager to position himself right in front of them to count the repetitions. He just agrees, stuttering. Already positioned behind the friend, Sukyoung asks her not to be afraid and to pull her body very slowly on the bar. The young woman agrees quietly with the instruction. Making a tremendous effort, Sunwoo grumbles that the exercise continues being very difficult even with someone pushing. Suddenly, the beautiful student widens her eyes upon noticing a surprising detail while doing the exercise. It turns out that the teenager is standing exactly in front of her, waiting patiently to count the movements. Staring at the young woman closely, the guy blinks his eyes, completely amazed by the enchanting view he has of her. The contact visual so direct and sudden leaves the girl with her face burning from embarrassment. Without understanding the pause, Sukyoung charges the friend, remembering it is to pull the body totally awkward. The young woman lets out a confused murmur. Making a monumental effort, the student tries to finish the repetition while the partner pushes her upward without stopping. As soon as she manages to get her chin over the bar, she ends up crossing her gaze directly with the teenager again. Trying to disguise the tense mood, the guy maintains the gaze fixed on her and breaks the silence, asking about that random rooster from earlier. The question out of time leaves the young woman completely speechless, while the blush on her face increases even more. With nervousness taking over, the student ends up losing strength in her hands and slips from the iron bar in a jolt. Without managing to hold on, she plunges with everything in a scream of terror and ends up falling heavily on top of her own friend. The main guy watches that tragic and totally unexpected scene, without managing to understand how the accident happened. Crushed on the dirt floor, the classmate questions the reason for the two to be with those weird faces. The culprit pair remains in total silence. Jinyoung takes advantage of the gap to blame the young woman's anemia, warning she shouldn't exert herself so much. Fallen on the floor, the friend grumbles, hitting back at the classmate. Desperate for the damage, Sunwoo gets up fast, asking for 1,000 apologies and checking if the partner is okay. Sukyoung just groans with pain on the grass. The wounded classmate complains that the friend was daydreaming during the exercise, while the bespectacled guy didn't even count the repetitions right. Maintaining the farce to hide the romantic tension, the main guy invents he ended up losing patience with their slowness. Furious at the guy's audacity, Sukyoung grabs both by the head at the same time, threatening to end their lives right there. The desperate scream of apologies from the beautiful student echoes through the park, while the brutal aggression happens in the open air. Soon time passes and the late afternoon colors the student complex sky with an orange tone, very quiet. After the great commotion, the teenager and the young woman walk side by side through the quiet streets returning home. Bringing up a subject, the guy comments that training left him exhausted. The student just agrees, stating that in the end she didn't even manage to do the exercise. With that, the main guy suggests it would be great if she learned some exercises with her friend in the future. Sunwoo guarantees she will think about it. In his thoughts, the teenager recalls the great tactic of knowing the enemy. He laments not having discovered almost nothing about the classmate's life that day. The muscular counselor appears, giving a thumbs up, approving that plans like that need to advance slowly and guaranteeing that the training was fun. Reaching a sidewalk crossing, the girl points the direction, warning she will follow that path. The guy agrees right away. She waves, saying goodbye in an adorable way, and guarantees they meet at school the next day. Caught by surprise, Jinyoung just murmurs the farewell. Noticing the classmate's hesitation standing there, the young woman turns her attention to him, asking if by chance he has anything to say. The teenager denies the suspicion quickly, stating it isn't absolutely nothing. The student stares at him, quite confused with the strange mood. Without giving much importance to this, she soon opens a smile, very gentle and enchanting, for her friend. Resuming the path, the beautiful young woman warns she asked only out of curiosity and says goodbye again, while the guy waves back. Totally frustrated with his own attitude, the student hits his chest, cursing the lamentable way he said goodbye to the girl. The muscular partner appears, letting out a heavy sigh of pure disappointment. Bothered, the teenager asks the reason for so much discouragement. The big guy adjusts his mustache and admits he also can't understand perfectly how a woman's heart works. However, Jason emphasizes having a very strong feeling that his friend just gave the worst possible response to the girl. The teenager stays confused with the speech. Walking toward his house, the teenager demands to know which part of the interaction was a mistake, telling the partner to speak the truth right away. Irritated by the mystery, Jinyoung charges his friend for always making those stupid judgments at the worst hours, demanding at least a good reason for it. Suddenly, Sukyoung appears on the path, startling the guy again. He jumps in terror, wanting to know how long the classmate has been following him there. Ignoring the reaction, Sukyoung starts to narrate a mysterious story. She relates that once she climbed the school roof on a night very dark. The young woman tells it was around 9 at night, and she imagined that only some teachers could be left over the empty campus at that time. However, the silence of the place was broken in a sudden way in the curious girl's narrative. She explains that out of absolute nothing, the sound of someone playing piano started to echo in a very clear way through the school roof. Knowing the music room is on the top floor, the student relates to have been very intrigued about who could be playing the instrument so late at night. The story mood gets tense when the girl reveals that right after a shiver of pure terror went down her spine. She breaks the horror mood, revealing that the shiver was solely because the melody was so wonderful and incredible that it left her completely fascinated. Back in the school hallways, the main guy and Juman stare at the girl with expressions of pure boredom after hearing the story without sense. Jinyoung complains about the dramatic way the classmate narrated the event. He confesses he arrived to get scared, thinking it would be a true horror tale. In the guy's mind, Jason trembles with fear, hugging his knees. He compares the tension with a terrible battle, while the teenager questions his partner's fear. Resuming the subject, the main guy gets curious and asks who was the mysterious genius on the piano, impressed with so much hidden talent at school. The chubby classmate butts into the conversation, asking if Sukyoung really doesn't know what it is about. The young woman gets quite confused with the question. Making a huge mystery, the student talks about the famous rumor of the music room ghost that haunts the school. The young woman takes a scare from the revelation. Jumin relates that a long time ago, a student used to stay alone in the music room playing piano every night without stopping. The gossip decrees in a dry way that the poor student ended up dying on the spot. Sukyoung gets in shock, wanting to know the reason for that tragedy. The bizarre legend tells that the girl choked on a piece of candy while she played. The classmate complains about the lack of details of that story so poorly told. The boy concludes the macabre rumor, revealing that, since that day, it is possible to hear the piano playing alone at dawn in the empty room. Assuming a dramatic and gloomy posture, Jumin concludes that the beautiful melody the classmate heard on the roof certainly was the choked ghost show. An awkward silence dominates the hallway while the pair of boys stares at the student. Sukyoung lets out a murmur, trying to process the ridiculous story. The main guy crosses his arms with an expression of pure disgust, criticizing the terrible quality of that haunting tale invented by the gossip classmate. He lets out a grunt of vicarious embarrassment, feeling the absurdity of that school legend so poorly structured. Surprising the teenager, Sukyoung starts to tremble with terror, covering her mouth with her hand. She admits she found the story terrifying, leaving him without reaction. Watching the classmate tremble, Jinyoung concludes that Sunwoo really doesn't stand scary stories and hides aside, very fearful. Suddenly, Hanjol's firm voice echoes through the hallway, calling both students' names. The teacher celebrates the perfect moment and asks for help in the teacher's room in case they aren't busy. Sukyoung agrees promptly to accompany the woman while the group walks through the hallway. Right behind, the chubby guy asks the classmate if that ghost story was true, admitting he had never heard of it. The gossip boy confesses with pride that he invented everything right there just to see the terror face of the girls. Satisfied with the lie, Jumin emphasizes that Sunwoo seemed genuinely terrified of the macabre tale. Hearing the absurdity, the student just stares at the classmate's back in total silence. Without a shred of patience, Sukyoung judges mentally the classmate as a complete lunatic. Night finally falls over the school, bringing a mood much more quiet and silent. Walking exhausted, the teenager comments that helping to grade tests was very tiring and praises the teacher's effort. Beside him, the beautiful student walks completely quiet and immersed in her own thoughts. Worried about the classmate, Jinyoung asks if everything is okay, noticing quickly her dejected look. Caught by surprise, Sunwoo tries to disguise the nervousness, holding his arm and guaranteeing that it isn't absolutely nothing. The teenager soon deduces that the fear is the fault of that ridiculous story from the chubby classmate, but the young woman denies right away. Giving pats on the guy, the student states that ghosts don't exist in the real world and guarantees not to be with the slightest fear. Jinyoung watches the classmate walk, trembling from feet to head, noticing that the legend of the girl choked on candy affected her for real. Suddenly, a soft melody starts to echo mysteriously through the empty hallways. The teenager stops at the same instant, wanting to understand where that piano sound is coming from. He finds it weird to play so late at night and deduces the noise comes straight from the arts room. Noticing the exact similarity with the rumor, the guy tries to convince himself that it is impossible to be a true haunting. Seeking a logical explanation, he supposes to be just some student training until later. With that, a gloomy and mysterious figure appears standing in the middle of the dark hallway right in front of them. The mood weighs completely before that bizarre apparition at the back of the school building. Trying to maintain calm, Jinyoung questions if there is still anyone walking through the school at that hour. The beautiful student enters a state of absolute terror, trembling without stopping and without managing to formulate any phrase. The panic increases when the weird creature starts to slide silently in the direction of the pair. Without managing to take the psychological pressure, the girl lets out a deafening scream of pure terror. Desperate, the young woman flees at full speed, going down the stairs and screaming about the ghost of the girl choked. The teenager runs right behind, charging an explanation from the classmate, who just calls for help along the way. Running through the darkness, Jinyoung reprimands the girl's disorderly flight while the strange figure remains in the hallway. The mysterious creature reveals itself being just teacher Hanjol, who is left without understanding the reason for the students fleeing from her. Wearing dark clothes in the lack of light, the woman questions seriously if her appearance is that scary. The teacher sighs, annoyed at the ridiculous situation and the great misunderstanding generated. Outside the school, the cold night dominates the residential neighborhood, with the building lights illuminating the landscape. Escaping the building, the main guy opens wide the iron door and finally arrives at the school roof area. Totally panting from the extreme run, the guy tries to recover the lost breath. He soon calls the student's name and finds her completely thrown on the hard ground of the location. Crouched beside her, the teenager asks what happened and suggests the cursed anemia attacked again because of the stairs. Ignoring the exhaustion, the young woman focuses on the danger and relates in panic that a dark thing advanced on her inside there. Jinyoung tries to calm the situation, blaming the chubby classmate's legend, but the soft music restarts at the same instant. Both freeze immediately upon hearing the mysterious melody echoing through the open roof. The guy finds it absurd someone plays piano so late and understands how the macabre rumors gain force at school. Seeing the student tremble with terror, clutching her own clothes, he feels the urgent need to calm her. Out of absolute nothing, the big guy Jason appears, stating that whole scary scenario is actually perfect. The teenager questions the madness, and the counselor explains it to be the golden chance to get close to Sunwoo. The muscular friend details that a girl terrified alone with a guy creates the ideal scenario for romance to happen. The tension on the roof creates a unique atmosphere that brings the pair close naturally under the moonlight. The student processes the advice and starts to understand the romantic strategy of his imaginary partner. Beside him, the young woman continues breathing with much difficulty because of the gigantic scare. Still scared, the beautiful girl admits that whole macabre situation gives much fear for real. Staring at the vulnerable classmate, Jinyoung recalls a quite famous psychological concept. The guy concludes mentally that that tense moment is about the classic effect of the suspension bridge. With the plan in mind, the main guy focuses on his goal of conquering the girl's heart. The student's heavy breathing shows she still hasn't managed to relax completely. She returns to confess her own fear and guarantees that the school vibe of dawn is terrifying. Jinyoung confirms in silence that shared fear is the perfect trigger for the suspension bridge effect. The guy prepares to use the danger's adrenaline in favor of his own teenage romance. Confident, he reviews the theoretical knowledge that extreme situations confuse the human mind. The delusion in his mind explains that the heart, accelerated by danger, ends up generating a false sensation of overwhelming passion. The main guy soon gives up the genius plan, realizing that the music played on the piano is too happy to maintain the terror mood. Analyzing the girl, he notes her face softened quite a bit, and the terror is already gone for good. Trying to bring up a subject, the guy praises the ghost's musical abilities, and the student agrees, laughing at the joke. Analyzing the sound beat, Sunwoo identifies the melody as a waltz, leaving the teenager surprised by her knowledge. The young woman reveals in a very quiet way that she took ballroom dance lessons during childhood. She explains she used to dance along with the chubby classmate, but hated the partnership and always made a scandal because of it. Questioned if she still practices the dance, the student denies, stating she prefers art lessons and remembering the anemia problem. To the teenager's surprise, the beautiful girl relates that the lazy boy is a true genius prodigy in dance. The main guy goes into shock, trying to imagine how on earth someone with that chubby body would manage to be a good dancer. Leaving the lazy guy behind, Jinyoung confesses that ballroom dance seems something very fun and totally outside his reality. The young woman touches her own chin, pensive, confessing not remembering almost anything for having been in the kindergarten era. Assuming a posture incredibly charming, she takes advantage of the free background music offered by the haunting pianist. Without any ceremony, the student advances one step and demands the classmate hand her his hand. Caught totally unprepared on the roof, the teenager stutters from nervousness and simply obeys the girl's order. The hands of both finally meet under the night sky to the sound of the beautiful, mysterious waltz. Continuing the romantic mood, the main guy holds the classmate's hand firmly and warns everything is ready. The beautiful student explains the next step of the dance, while the guy hesitates a bit. But the teenager's slowness speaks louder and he steps with everything on her foot, tearing out a scream of pain. The poor guy enters panic and asks for 1,000 apologies, while the young woman holds the bruised foot, cursing with pain. He asks if the girl is okay, who soon recalls that her leg hasn't yet recovered from Sukyoung's kick. Trying not to ruin the moment, she extends her hand again and tells them to try one more time. The student asks the classmate to give a turn, which he tries to do in the most clumsy way possible. With that, the main guy's foot ends up turning the wrong way in the middle of the movement. Without managing to maintain balance, the guy collapses on the floor while the partner screams frightened. The young woman bursts into laughter seeing the disaster, and he grumbles that his nose still hurts from the old blow. The mood soon calms down, and the beautiful student stares at the classmate with a very gentle expression. She suggests they try doing the dance again, receiving the immediate confirmation from the teenager. Changing the tone suddenly, the girl threatens to break his foot if there is another step, making him ask for forgiveness. Already getting up from the floor, the main guy laughs from nervousness and asks her to teach him right. Totally focused, the student extends her hand in an elegant pose and asks how one asks to dance. The unexpected and romantic attitude of the guy leaves the student totally speechless for an instant. Impressed with the classmate's charm, she lets out a small murmur of admiration. Accepting the invitation on the illuminated roof, the young woman responds she also counts on his care in the dance. The teenager remains completely fascinated watching the girl's beauty under the moonlight. Taking advantage of the calm moment, Sunwoo comments on the famous legend of the music room ghost. The narrative remembers that no one at school knew who was responsible for that mysterious nightly melody. Soon, all this sound mystery served as the perfect fuel to create haunting rumors among the students. However, the imaginary counselor reflects that that same scary music ended up gaining a new purpose now. With both dancing together under the starry sky, the haunting waltz transformed into a true romantic gift. The immense school building remains silent, housing this special moment on the roof. Walking through the hallways to leave, Jinyoung calls the classmate's attention in a very casual way. He asks if the student still continues drawing, and she confirms quickly that yes. Excited, the guy asks her to draw a muscular mustached man in the future, promising to return the favor. The young woman confesses she doesn't have much of a knack for drawing people, but guarantees she can try to do that later. The main guy reflects in silence he had no clue about that artistic talent of the girl. Accompanying her steps, the guy starts thinking if there wasn't anything else he wanted to try doing. Suddenly, the student stops walking and warns she needs to give a quick trip to the bathroom. She moves away through the dark hallway, while the classmate asks worried if there is no problem going alone. Watching the young woman disappear into the darkness, the teenager finds all that sudden courage very strange. He recalls she was terrified minutes ago, but now walks through the school without the slightest bit of fear. Scratching his chin, the guy tries to deduce if the classmate just ended up getting used to the scary atmosphere of the place. With that, the imaginary counselor appears with a posture very suspicious and finds the situation very suspect. Jinyoung doesn't understand the suspicion, and the muscular friend recalls the great plan of the suspension bridge they were going to use. With an analytical look, Jason raises the theory that that romantic tactic based on fear perhaps explains everything. The partner suggests that the psychological effect was already dominating the young woman's mind this whole time. Far away, the beautiful girl touches up her own makeup in the bathroom mirror with much tranquility. She gives a little laugh mocking the legend of the music room, stating that ghosts don't exist in the real world. Complaining mentally about the pain in her foot, the student curses the classmate as a clumsy brute with a tone of pure charm. While that, a door with the music room sign creaks slightly at the back of the school hallway. Teacher Han Jeol opens the room door wanting to know if the person already finished playing the instrument. Leaning at the room's entrance, the woman warns it is already too late and tells the student to tidy up things to go home. The scene reveals a student with short hair sitting at the piano while the teacher calls by her name. Totally immersed in darkness, the girl named Yojin lets out only a weak murmur demonstrating much sadness. The young woman asks quietly to play just one more song, but the woman complains not managing to hear anything of what she says. After the student's shy apology, the teacher yields and agrees to end the night right there. The channel owner celebrates excitedly that the views simply exploded after that small appearance of hers. The student tells that the people in the comments are crazed wanting to know if they are close friends and when another video will come out. Giving much laughter at the situation, the young woman comments that followers don't stop praising the friend's beauty on the internet. The girls joke asking if the classmate will become a famous influencer now, while she tries to keep focus. The phone owner suggests that they record decently together this time, promising to pay for a snack for all when the video monetizes. Sunwoo hesitates for an instant, but soon ends up topping the prank and agrees to participate in the recording. The day follows its normal course at the huge student complex of the city. Elsewhere, the big guy Jason assumes a serious posture announcing the day's great goal. Walking firmly through the hallway, the counselor tells his friend to invite Sunwoo to go to the canteen, receiving his confirmation. The guy questions insecure if that attitude isn't too obvious, but the big guy rejects the doubt right away. Jason charges his friend's decision to approach the young woman, emphasizing that that invitation is only an initial training step. The student confirms he already took his decision and only needs to gather a little courage to act, being highly praised by the partner. Standing at the classroom door, the teenager lets out a murmur revealing to be completely dominated by nervousness. Jinyong finally gathers courage and opens the door greeting the people inside. Immediately he notices the students recording, with the channel owner asking for Sunwoo's name, who jokes maintaining the mystery for the fans. The channel owner celebrates excitedly that the views simply exploded after that small appearance of hers. The student tells that the people in the comments are crazed wanting to know if they are close friends and when another video will come out. Giving much laughter at the situation, the young woman comments that followers don't stop praising the friend's beauty on the internet. The girls joke asking if the classmate will become a famous influencer now, while she tries to keep focus. The phone owner suggests that they record decently together this time, promising to pay for a snack for all when the video monetizes. Sunwoo hesitates for an instant, but soon ends up topping the prank and agrees to participate in the recording. The day follows its normal course at the huge student complex of the city. Elsewhere, the big guy Jason assumes a serious posture announcing the day's great goal. Walking firmly through the hallway, the counselor tells his friend to invite Sunwoo to go to the canteen, receiving his confirmation. The guy questions insecure if that attitude isn't too obvious, but the big guy rejects the doubt right away. Jason charges his friend's decision to approach the young woman, emphasizing that invitation is only an initial training step. The student confirms he already took his decision and only needs to gather a little courage to act, being highly praised by the partner. Standing at the classroom door, the teenager lets out a murmur revealing to be completely dominated by nervousness. Jinyong finally gathers courage and opens the door greeting the people inside. Immediately he notices the students recording, with the channel owner asking for Sunwoo's name, who jokes maintaining the mystery for the fans. Exuding charisma for the camera, the channel owner guarantees to the followers that the three are great friends at school. Standing at the classroom entrance, the teenager realizes the group is busy recording a video right at that moment. Deducing the beautiful student is too busy to talk, he makes the quick decision to come back another time. At that exact instant, Sunwoo notices from the corner of her eye the classmate retreating at the door. The student turns his back silently and follows his path through the school's empty hallway. Watching his sudden exit, the girl is left with a visibly upset expression. Later, Jinyong laments that his great mission of inviting the young woman to the canteen failed totally today. He recalls the excited scene of the friends recording together and understands that the moment was terrible to bother. The late afternoon paints the neighborhood sky with orange tones, announcing the end of another school day. Walking through the residential streets, the main guy accepts the defeat, recognizing that the classmate is incredibly popular. He confesses admiring the young woman, surprised for not having a clue she had so many close friendships like that at school. Suddenly, a sudden little tap on his back scares the guy while an excited voice calls his name on the street. The beautiful student appears exuding charm, asking in an ironic tone if he is walking and talking to himself again. Sweating cold, the teenager denies desperately the monologue, while the girl gives a teasing little laugh at the excuse. Giving little taps on the poor guy's back, Sunwoo warns she always catches him in that weird habit, forcing him to ask how she knows about that. Changing the subject, the young woman warns she forgot to recharge her bus card, suggesting he accompany her home, which he agrees right away. However, the video recording girl's voice echoes through the street calling the friend, making Sunwoo close her face immediately. The channel owner approaches excited, celebrating the perfect moment, while the beautiful student tries to disguise the frustration. The teenager greets the girls politely, and the meddlesome student soon asks if the friend is very busy now. Without losing time, the channel owner proposes that they record the school video, taking advantage of that casual meeting on the sidewalk. The long-haired friend notices the main guy standing there, questioning the romance vibe in the air. The video girl whispers that they need to stay in their lane and gives space to the couple at that moment, giving malicious giggles. But Sunwoo cuts the talk right away, guaranteeing they have to record tomorrow without fail and saying goodbye to the guy in a hurry. While being dragged by her friends, the channel owner asks if they are demanding too much, but the young woman guarantees that there is no problem at all. However, upon looking back, the beautiful student casts an incredibly gloomy and intense look in the direction of the main guy. Ignoring the tension, the friends celebrate excited, promising to pay a delicious snack for her later as thanks. Planted on the sidewalk, Jinyong questions if those girls are really that intimate with her, admitting to know nothing about the classmate's social life. The guy reflects on the comment of an old friend, recording that the young woman used to maintain a good relationship with everyone at school. Suddenly, the teenager blinks his eyes, totally confused upon processing the scene he just witnessed. His mind revives that brief macabre instant in which the girl exhibited an extremely terrifying and controlling expression. The guy questions himself mentally what would be wrong with that whole situation. Shaken, he tries to understand the reason for the beautiful girl having made such a gloomy look at that time. Immediately, he recalls that the student let out a heavy sigh before walking away. In the memory, Sunwoo curses herself as an idiot, calling the classmate's name, who asks the reason without understanding anything. She then displays the bus card, inventing that she had completely forgotten to recharge the ticket yesterday. With that, the young woman warns she needs to pass by a place and dismisses the guy's company, who accepts the excuse somewhat lost. The teenager recalls the classmate waving while she went away alone down the deserted street. Back to reality, Jinyoung analyzes the cold expression she made, admitting to have felt an incredible disconnection coming from the girl. He repeats the word disconnection, trying to process the weight of that weird sensation. Soon, the memory of the gossip classmate telling about that same bizarre energy in childhood comes to the surface. Clenching his fist, the student concludes he finally felt on his own skin what the chubby guy was trying to warn about. The imaginary big guy appears agreeing with the theory, highlighting the girl's irritation for such a silly situation. Jason highlights her hurried escape, confirming that that was the famous macabre disconnection and questioning his friend's next step. Jinyoung adopts a totally determined posture before the counselor, who asks if he will really investigate this story. Accepting the challenge, the guy confirms that yes, believing that resolving this great mystery will open the way to approach her. The big guy praises his partner's determination and warns he will pass his next mission. Intrigued, the teenager asks what would be this new task. Already at night, the quiet and very dark mood takes over the huge empty park of the city. Following the imaginary partner's orientation, the guy needed to call the person who seemed to be the most intimate with Sunwoo to have a very serious conversation. The teenager's main intention at the location is to discover the truth hidden about the classmate, but suddenly a voice breaks the silence calling his name. Sukyoung approaches walking quietly through the square and soon questions the great reason for having been called by the guy at a time so late at night. Finding much fun in that unusual situation, the sporty student jokes telling the guy not to end up falling head over heels for her. Standing in front of his training companion, Jinyoung decides to risk everything to dig a little deeper and investigate her secrets.